impact of the pandemic on the American economy and that inflation was bound to happen, yet it was much controlled. But unemployment happens to be an issue that perhaps the Democrats, if they were to enter the White House yet again, will have to look into. At the same time, Kamala Harris, and I think Zaka has also been talking about it, the Democrats have been burning the midnight oil, especially when it is about door-to-door campaigning, Avantika. I think what's been a very decisive factor in this entire presidential election is the way the Republicans have chosen to campaign versus the Democrats. Republicans have made their election rallies larger than life. It's a lot about masculine, nationalistic rhetoric versus the Democrats who've in fact gone door-to-door, urging voters to come out and cast their vote. 100,000 to say the least have been approached just at the doors, and Kamala Harris has approached many of them. So I think the Democrats have really hit the ground running, and will that sort of translate into votes? We've been talking about the swing states, namely Michigan, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, of course, as I've also been saying, will be the king.
Right, to our continuing coverage of the US presidential elections. Voting presently is underway, but we have some big news coming in. Just the early leads, voting is still going on. In fact, we're hearing that the former president Donald Trump has won Wyoming. In fact, this is the state that he had won in 2016 and 2020 as well. So a big news coming in. In fact, he surged past 100 electoral votes, with projections showing him ahead in very important key states. But former President Trump winning Wyoming in the 2024 presidential race, a state that he had won in 2016-2020, beating his Democratic opponent by about 45% points in both the cycles. So Wyoming, that's the big one. In fact, CNN projections is also saying that Trump is winning in South Dakota. Not just that, he is taking a lead in North Carolina and Georgia as well. So two big important states, swing states, Georgia and North Carolina, Trump taking a lead. In fact, he's already won Florida, Alabama, Indiana, Kentucky, Missouri, Oklahoma, Tennessee and West Virginia. So this is the information that we're getting in right now about the early leads and the information coming in from an important state like Wyoming, which the former president Donald Trump has already won earlier before in 2016 and 2020. And importantly, he's taking a lead in North Carolina and Georgia as well. North Carolina was a state that he had won in 2016 and in 2020 as well, wherein Trump had beaten Clinton and in Biden as well. Zaka Jacob joins us now for the very latest. Zaka, this is some news coming in. The former President Donald Trump winning Wyoming, and not just that, he has surged past 100 electoral votes, with projections showing him ahead in some important key states. He's also taking a lead in North Carolina and in Georgia as well. What's the latest at your end, and what exactly are you hearing?
Yeah, so I just want to qualify for our viewers the numbers that are running up. I think Donald Trump at 154 and
Yes.
Kamala Harris at 30. That's because a large proportion of, the blue states, New York, New Jersey, many of the East Coast states have not been declared yet. California, which is the biggest state, which has reliably been Democratic, has not been declared. So when those numbers come in, it'll be much more even. It won't be this 154-30. But I think the critical thing to watch out for is the battleground states. From what I have seen right now in Georgia and in North Carolina, Trump is leading, so that's a positive sign for him. That shows that if he holds on to Georgia, he lost Georgia by a very narrow margin last time, he has multiple paths to 270. North Carolina was a big sort of, people were speculating about it because of the hurricane. Large parts of the state were devastated by the hurricane. And of course, today what they saw, a large number of African Americans turning out. So far, those two states have counted much more votes than the blue wall states because they closed earlier. And I believe in Georgia, for example, 70% of the vote has been counted, and Trump has a decent lead of 200,000 plus. Whether or not, when the Atlanta suburban areas and Metro Atlanta start sort of coming in, the votes start coming in, whether there is enough votes there for Kamala Harris to negate Trump's lead in Georgia, we'll have to wait and see. But if Georgia and North Carolina go to Trump, then that means for Kamala Harris, it's a very straight but narrow path to victory, which is that she has to win Pennsylvania, she has to win Michigan, and she has to win Wisconsin. And all of those three states, very limited amounts of vote count have happened so far. I believe in Pennsylvania, less than 20% of the vote has been counted. Yes, Kamala Harris is leading by a wide margin, but it is very, very early days yet. It's going to take a while before we get the results of these three states. And frankly, I think Kamala Harris's presidential chances, her hope of winning the presidency rests on these three states. Unless she wins all three, I don't see her having a path to 270.
Interesting. Zaka, stay on with me. We have Ray Locker, author and journalist, Anang Mittal, who's a communication strategist. Mr. Mittal, I want to bring you here. We are just getting in news, as my colleague Zaka was also just pointing it out, about the early leads coming in and Trump looking good, at least for now, in the very crucial battleground states of Georgia and North Carolina. Georgia, in fact, it had been leading to Republican, but it also had seen this pivotal shift in 2020 when Biden had beaten Trump. But what does this mean with him taking a lead, at least in the initial threats? I know it's too soon to call the election, and the important voting in the swing states still has to happen, especially Pennsylvania. But what do you make of these early trends coming in?
Yeah, these early trends, as other panelists have said, are reflective of the past realities of what happened in past elections. What you also have to remember is that one of the reasons that Trump was calling for that the election was stolen or there were issues was because a lot of the late votes that came in seemed to him, at least, to be wrong, or somehow he was winning and then all of a sudden he wasn't winning, and those were because of the absentee ballots. Those were because of the late votes that were being counted. And so again, all of this early exuberance about Trump's lead may actually die out or be dulled as the later votes, the absentee ballots, completely fill in and maybe reduce some of that lead. So remains to be seen what's going to happen. I think Trump, definitely took a better tack with Georgia this time. He tried very hard to not anger the governor, who's very popular in Georgia, and tried very hard not to, completely go all in on him and on the people of Georgia. Because Georgia should have been Republican. In 2020, there were two Republican senators from there, and now there's two Democrat senators, and there's no that cost the Republicans the Senate leadership. So nobody in the Republican side at least wants to see them lose Georgia one more time.
Oh, that's true. But it was a very close contest between Biden and Trump in Georgia, isn't it, Mr. Mittal? 49.5% to 49.3%, if I'm not mistaken. I just have to take a very short break right here, gentlemen. I'll come back to you in just a bit. Stay tuned. We'll be back with lots more big news and these updates, early trends coming in on the U.S. presidential elections. Keep watching.
Yeah. That's when the first big state of Georgia will close. That's 16 electoral college votes. Biden had won it by a narrow 12,000 votes in 2020. If Kamala Harris manages to win Georgia, then that opens up multiple paths for her to win 270, to win the White House. But if Georgia stays red, as it has always been, except in 2020, then Donald Trump is on firmer footing. Then at 7:30, which is at 6 a.m. India time, North Carolina, which is another big state, again, 16 electoral college votes.
County of the state. You have it up here in Raleigh-Durham, the Research Triangle. An African-American population plus a high college-educated population, a lot of young voters. So both parties have their base. The question is who can win the middle. Just one thing to look at in these states, right? So let's look at the African-American population and bring it out. The darker the shading, the higher the African-American population. This is North Carolina, and then I'll bring you out and come down and we'll look at the state of Georgia. The Democrats have a built-in base here if Kamala Harris can get high turnout and keep the loyalty of African-American voters. African-American turnout critical in these two states. Here's a different way to look at it. You can look at it this way and bring this out here. Let me do this here for you. Race and ethnicity. This is the state of Georgia. Right, 51% white, 31% of the state population is black, African-American voters, the foundation of the Democratic Party. That's in North Carolina. You pop out to the United States just to get the look. It's 12% nationally, right? And that's what it is in Georgia. And then you come over here to North Carolina and look again, 21% there. So two states that have a significant African-American population. If Kamala Harris can not only win that with a high percentage, but they'd come up with a really high number. It's not just the percentage, she needs the math in the urban areas as well. So what else do you have in these states? Let's come back out and let's turn this. In both states, again, Donald Trump has a rural base. Democrats have an urban base. This will be decided, that's Virginia, excuse me. This will be decided in the suburbs. And again, Joe Biden, this was the closest. This was Donald Trump's closest win, if you will. 74,000 votes here of his battleground wins. This was
projected in battleground Pennsylvania. Kamala Harris in the lead, 57.5% of the vote. Donald Trump, 41.5% of the vote. Kamala Harris with a 258,000 plus vote lead. That's with about a quarter, 23% of the estimated vote in Pennsylvania counted as of now. In battleground Michigan, Kamala Harris with 53.7% of the vote. Donald Trump with 44.3% of the vote. Harris with a 64,000 plus vote lead. That's with an estimated 12% of the vote counted in Michigan. Still very early in Michigan. In battleground North Carolina, Donald Trump in the lead. 50.7% of the vote. Harris with 48.1% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 75,000 plus vote lead. That's with more than half, 51% of the estimated vote counted in battleground North Carolina. In battleground Georgia, Donald Trump still holding on to his lead, 52.9% of the vote. Harris has 46.4% of the vote. Donald Trump right now with a 249,000 plus vote lead. Now it's a 255,000 vote lead. That's with an estimated 71% of the vote counted in battleground Georgia. In Virginia, Donald Trump in the lead as of now, 49.3% of the vote. Kamala Harris has 48.7% of the vote. Donald Trump is ahead by more than 15,000 votes. That's with more than half, 56% of the estimated vote, but still a lot of vote to come in the Commonwealth of Virginia. In New Hampshire, Harris with 53.4% of the vote. Donald Trump with 45.9% of the vote. Harris with an 18,000 plus vote lead. That's with under a third of the vote counted in New Hampshire. 30% of the estimated vote counted in New Hampshire. In Ohio, Donald Trump in the lead, 54.3% of the vote. Harris with 44.8% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 332,000 plus vote lead. That's with almost 60%, 58% of the estimated vote counted in the Buckeye state. Now let's go to John King at the Magic Wall. John.
And so, Jake, you lay out the results, and there are some surprises there, right? At least where we are right now. So we just want to go back and follow up where we were. David Chellian was talking about some of the outstanding vote. We know in Virginia is early vote, and that percentage is going to jump, and we know that the vice president is doing quite well in that vote. So I just want to show you what he means by how this can change. Again, Donald Trump's lead has been shrinking. It was 16,000 not that long ago. It's 12,395 now. Look at the Northern Virginia suburbs here. I just want to show you these circles help us understand where are there live outstanding votes, meaning votes that we know are out there that have not been counted yet. Right? You see the big circles, the biggest circles around the Northern Virginia suburbs, also Richmond and the suburbs around that, and some big Republican circles down here, Virginia Beach area, and some here in the suburbs more to the south, the exurbs south of Richmond. But I want to focus up here, and just to show you why you can say early on, you say, whoa, what's happening here? But then things can change pretty quickly when large population centers report their votes. So let's take Fairfax County. It's the largest of the suburban counties. It's the #1 county population-wise in Virginia. The vice president's getting 66% of the vote, 63% of the vote in. Look at the number where she is, though, 250,000. We know turnout is robust, right? So we should be somewhere around 2020 when we end 2024, maybe a little higher, maybe a little lower, but somewhere around it. 250,000 votes right now. If you go back in time, you see 419,000 votes. So if she's winning 60+%, the president was winning 70% 4 years ago. You have Vice President Harris winning 66, a little below. Virginia looks like it's going to be a little bit more competitive this year. But you can see just right there in that one county, there's a lot of votes still out, and she's winning disproportionately in the math right now. That can change, but it generally tracks when you get above 60% of the vote. And so just in that one county right there, the math, when those votes come in, the math can change. So it doesn't mean it will. But there's more than enough Democratic votes still outstanding, or votes outstanding in Democratic areas is the better way to put it, for that to happen. So let's check in on the other battlegrounds as we go through. This one, again, go back in time. This was the closest Donald Trump victory in a battleground state of the battlegrounds he won. 74,000 votes, 483, 74,483. 4 years ago, he's 110 ahead right now, but we're only at 54% of the vote, right? So you see these gray areas. What are those? That's where you have no votes in yet. So we're still waiting. Some of these smaller counties. This one.
All right, we also have with us right now on the broadcast Harsh Shringla, the ambassador who's joining us. Mr. Shringla, thank you so much for speaking to CNN News 18. We've just gotten these early results, early trends coming in right now. Trump surging past 150 electoral votes. In fact, he's holding on to his lead in important states like North Carolina and Georgia as well. But if we talk about the U.S. presidential election, you know, it's been full of twists and turns with 2 assassination attempts on Donald Trump. From India's perspective, I wanted to understand from you how important is this election, and also, you know, if at all the former president, Donald Trump, is elected to power. What does this mean for India, given his very strategic outreach recently to the Indian diaspora, how he condemned the recent attacks on Indian minorities in Bangladesh?
So just a brief word before I respond to your question to put things in perspective. I think it's very early, and
Yes,
the trends
indeed.
that you're seeing does not indicate in any way the final result, because these are expected trends. And what is important are the battleground states, and I think what's important is
Yes.
Pennsylvania and Michigan, where Kamala Harris seems to be leading.
She's
But
leading in
having said that,
Pennsylvania, yes.
and Michigan, I think. So I think having said that, let's come down to the question at hand. I think obviously the U.S. elections is very important for a close strategic partner like India. We are so interlinked in many ways to the U.S. economy in terms of investments, technology, trade, the people-to-people ties, but also at the political level, a strategic connect between our two countries as quad partners brings us, I think, much closer in many senses. The defense aspect of it also cannot be underemphasized.
Oh, absolutely. You know why, Mr. Shringla, I talked about Trump is because of his camaraderie that he shares with the Prime Minister. And you know how both of them are very aligned as far as Trump making America great again and Modi's emphasis on India first. You know, both of them having very similar interests as far as domestic economy is concerned or secure borders as well.
Yeah, well, I've seen firsthand the personal connect that Donald Trump had with Prime Minister Modi. I think they really hit it off very well. Howdy Modi was a prime example of how the two came together to address an audience of 50,000 Indian Americans. And then Trump came to India, and we had Namaste Trump, which was a huge success with the 1 lakh people in that stadium in Ahmedabad. But having said that, the Prime Minister also has a very, very good relationship with Kamala Harris. He has met her as Vice President in 2021 and last year when I think he visited Washington, D.C., had a state visit there. And from that point of view, it's very important that whoever is President of the United States has a good rapport with the Prime Minister of India for that relationship to move forward. So Prime Minister Modi has had a great relationship with President Obama, President Trump, President Biden, and with Vice President Kamala Harris. And I think that's the way it should be. But yes, I mean, Trump has been president. He's a known commodity. We've dealt with him. He's got good things to say about Prime Minister Modi and about India. I think he's cognizant about some of the concerns that we have, not only in India, but in our neighborhood. So I think
and he also cut military aid to Pakistan, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Shringla, isn't that right?
Yes, that's right. That's right. Absolutely. That happened when I was ambassador, and successive U.S. presidents have been threatening to cut military aid to Pakistan, and Trump really went and did it. And he also brought down other assistance to Pakistan to a bare minimum. So I think he means business. And even in terms of tariffs, we are worried about tariffs. He did increase some of the tariffs with India, but then he went and levied a 25% tariff increase on $350 billion of Chinese imports into America. And I think that really gave us a window of opportunity, which took our trade to a much higher level, and our exports really boomed as a result of that. So there is a collateral benefit that we have seen. And even in his campaign, in the last 1 month, he's used the word China 40 times. And of course, I think his focus has been on the strategic aspects of the US's outlook. In many senses, we share from a quad perspective and as a strategic partner of the United States.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, both the leaders have emphasized on domestic growth, on economic nationalism, and most importantly, secure borders. Kindly stay on with me, Ambassador. I also have with us on the broadcast Dr. Joseph M. Chalil, who's a noted author, Seher Khan, a foreign policy expert as well. Thank you so much and a very good morning to all of my guests. Dr. Joseph, what do you make of this very tightly fought elections between the former president and the Vice President Kamala Harris? I mean, both of them neck and neck. These are some real anxious moments for the people of the United States. You know, it's an election which is immensely significant in U.S. history as well.
Good morning and greetings from Palm Beach, Florida, hometown of Donald Trump. I was just at the convention center. We were usually the watch parties for election nights are in smaller halls with, let's say, 1,000 or 2,000 people. Trump actually moved his convention watch party to the Palm Beach Convention Center, which can host tens of thousands of people. And it's sold out for the past few days. We couldn't even get a journalist in there. So the excitement is very big here. And this is maybe in my lifetime, I've been working, here for over 24 years with multiple Republican presidents and Democratic presidents. This is the first time it's a changed election. The electorate has changed. The coalition has changed. So if Trump is able to pull this off, I think it's going to be a miracle. But I'm expecting that not just the presidency, but they are feeling very good about the Senate and the Congress, because the president by himself is handicapped without having the Senate control, because the Senate is needed to confirm all the appointees, including all the ministers, secretaries, as we call it here, and all the department heads need to be approved and confirmed by the Senate. So let's say even the president wins without Senate majority, he's a handicapped president. So, but again, even though what we see, the early leads, nothing is surprising as we speak from the results we see. But remember, the Florida, where I'm from, and Ohio, where now both places Trump won, were
both places have gone the Trump way. Dr. Joseph, just kindly stay on with me, and Seher, I'll just come to you in a moment. Zaka Jacob is also joining us right now. In fact, he's getting us all the live updates as well. Zaka, as Dr. Joseph was mentioning, it's a changed election. It's a changed electorate as well. I want you to talk a little bit more about the key demographics groups that's going to be a decider in this presidential election, because Trump did lose ground with the white college voters in especially the swing states. I mean, Biden won 6 out of the 7 states. A lot, in fact, had changed post-COVID as well. So if you could just talk about, the shift that we have seen in American politics as well.
I'll just come to that in 1 second. I think there's a lot of noise here in the crowd that's there at Howard University. A large number, they're shouting Kamala Harris, saying we will win. There's a giant screen where they're playing CNN, so I suspect there is some state or some key race alert or projection that they've made, which is why there is so much screaming going on. I don't know what state has been called. What I do know so far is that Georgia and North Carolina, more than 70% of the vote has been counted.
It's New York. They've called New York. And that's perhaps why we are hearing the jubilant voices behind you and the celebrations as well.
Okay, that's 28 electoral college votes. So the electoral college math is now sort of bumping up a little bit more for Kamala Harris. But look, all of this is actually, frankly, irrelevant, because these are all states that are set. Ultimately, the president is going to be chosen by those half a dozen or so battleground states. And there, 2 of those states, Georgia and North Carolina, one went to Biden, the other went to Trump last time around. Georgia was very, very close last time. It was just 12,000 votes that separated the 2 candidates. This time around, over 70% of the vote has been counted. And last time I checked, Donald Trump had a 200,000 odd lead. So I think it's safe to say, unless something really dramatic happens in the suburbs of Atlanta and Metro Atlanta, where there is still a ton of votes to come, unless there is a dramatic change of fortunes there, I think it looks like Georgia might go back to the Republican corner, as it always was. Remember, the last Democrat who carried Georgia before Biden was Bill Clinton in 1992. Again, in North Carolina, more than 70% of the vote has been counted. And last I checked, Trump was leading over 100,000. So he's again in relatively safer territory, if I may say so. Again, still 30% of the vote to be counted. But in the other blue wall states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, only 20% of the vote has been counted, which means there is still 80% of the vote that needs to be counted. Similarly, in Michigan, only 10% of the vote has been counted so far, so 90% of the vote is still outstanding. So I think it's going to take a long time to get to those 3 states to at least get to a point where, they're 50% in or 60% in counted. But I think the critical thing is what this means. If Georgia and North Carolina stay with Trump, then it means Harris has one straight shot at the presidency, and that is she has to win Pennsylvania, she has to win Michigan, she has to win Wisconsin. Is that an ideal place you want to find yourself in as a candidate? who is hoping to win the presidency, no, it's not an ideal place because it's your one straight line shot. You have to win those three states. Even if you miss one of those states, you're out of the competition. Whereas for Donald Trump, if he manages to retain Georgia and North Carolina, and we'll see how Arizona and Nevada go. We don't know the projections for those two states.
Right.
But Arizona, he's been leading by over 2 points for the last couple of weeks. So that means then Trump needs to win just one of Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, which puts him in a slightly more comfortable position than Kamala Harris.
Well, he's holding on to his lead, at least for now, in North Carolina and Georgia, two very crucial battleground states. Let's just quickly dip into our sister channel, CNN, because there is some very important information coming in as well. Listen in.
In Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, hold that Nebraska congressional district I just showed you, then you're the president of the United States. Right? That's her easiest. No path is easy, but her easiest path is keep the blue wall. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. So let's move up Wisconsin so you can get a better look at home. She's ahead right now at the moment, but we're only 18% of the vote. And again, John's a broken record tonight, but I want you to look up at all of those gray areas. And I just want to remind you, in most of them, not all of them, but in most of them, you're in rural Trump country. So as you come back to the 2024 map and you say the vice president's ahead, that's where you want to be. You want to be ahead, but you've got a long way to go. So what are we looking for? I'm going to do this in reverse order. Because of the questions about young voters turning out, whether unhappiness with the White House over Israel-Gaza, Israel-Hamas policy would impact youth turnout. 38% in Dane County, that's the University of Wisconsin. Absolutely essential for any Democratic win in Wisconsin to run it up here, not just in the percentage, but with the raw math. So let's look. 38% of the vote. So a long way to go. Long way to go. Let's just compare it to the president. President Biden had 76%. Keep an eye on it. Don't panic yet if you're a Democrat, but keep an eye on that because the vice president needs to be as close to that as she can be. And at the moment, she's running a little bit behind that. That's Dane County. That's Madison. This is the biggest population center. Spent a lot of time here in the last year. The big question here is, do black voters turn out? And the subset question of that is, does Donald Trump make inroads, especially among black men? We did see some evidence of that in our several trips out to Milwaukee. At the moment, I was texting with somebody in Milwaukee earlier, by the way, who said they thought turnout was actually going pretty good for the Democrats. We'll see if that turns out. At the moment, 25% of the vote in, 66% if you round up, 32% for Donald Trump. So let's just go back in time knowing we have a long way to go. And Milwaukee sometimes reports late. But if you go back in time, Joe Biden again, 69%, Trump at 29%. So the 69% is what jumps out. Trump is a little above right now. Trump's a little above where he was 4 years ago. She's a little behind where the president was 4 years ago. It's only 25% of the vote. We're not pouring cement on any of this, but that's where you say, oh, we got to keep an eye on that as we go forward. Then you move over here, you go into the WOW counties, Waukesha, the biggest among them. This is a Republican suburb. Long has been a Republican suburb. The challenge for Democrats, I've been saying this about Trump in the battleground states that tend to lead in blue. Where's Trump's number in the suburbs? Can he compete? He's not going to win, but can he compete? That's the challenge for the vice president here. Waukesha County tends to be a Republican suburb. So there she is at 40%, Trump at 59%. Again, you go back in time, 59% to 39% 4 years ago. Welcome to another 20,000 vote race.
All right, so those are some of these early trends, and we reiterate it's just too soon, very, very early, information coming in right now. Seher Khan joins us. She's a foreign policy expert. Seher, thank you so much, first of all, for your patience. Seher, now, that's the news coming in. Donald Trump surging that 100 mark in electoral votes. I want to talk about, how has Donald Trump come back from political abyss? I mean, his popularity plummeted as he tried to overturn the 2020 elections, and then all of a sudden he rebounded and with the early leads coming in, surging past the 100 electoral votes. So what do you make of the dominance of Donald Trump despite all the scams and scandals against him?
Well, thank you so much for having me on your show. It's such a pleasure to speak to you. And of course, I've been watching the election race quite closely as well. I think the question you ask has been on everybody's mind. And to some extent, I think this kind of represents or indicates the division in American society. And certainly in 2020, former President Trump's reputation and his popularity plummeted because at the end of the day, the peaceful transition of power has been a hallmark of U.S. democracy, regardless of how contentious races have been and how candidates have argued on debates and on the campaign trail, when an election has been lost, the losing candidate has always shook the hand of the winning candidate, and there has been a smooth transition of power. And that did not happen in 2020. And for a lot of Americans, that was a wake-up call of how divided America has become. And I think this election, what we're really seeing is a dissatisfaction with the Biden presidency and the Biden administration on several key issues, some domestic, but also some international as well. And usually in US elections, foreign policy doesn't play that big of a role. Most elections, while we'll talk about foreign policy, it'll be a point on the campaign trail. When people come out to vote, they're voting for domestic issues. So you have the economy, you have jobs, you have abortion, stuff like that, that becomes a bigger player. I think now, because of the wars that are engulfing our world in Ukraine, in Gaza, and the electorate being younger and and they're basically using social media a lot for their news. I think we're seeing a change also in how people want the US presidency to react. So I do agree that it's a little too early to tell, how, and all the states that have been called are what we expected. So there are no surprises there.
Yes.
So I think it's a little too early to be thinking if this is a Trump presidency or not. But I really think it really shows how divided America is. The demographics of America are changing, and this is what we're seeing playing out now.
Oh, indeed. And I completely second you on that, how the demographics have changed, how there's been a shift in American politics in the last few years, especially post-COVID. Ambassador Shringla, as I've been saying, how significant these elections are in the U.S. history, how do you think it would impact not just the nation's future, but also global geopolitics in the years to come?
It's absolutely critical, I feel, because we are in a very, very volatile state as far as global affairs is concerned. You have regional conflicts that are threatening to become global conflicts. The U.S. is at the heart of all of this in terms of, its both its involvement and its ability to impact on these conflicts.
Yes.
I think whoever becomes president would have a great responsibility. A good part of the world looks to the United States for global leadership on these issues. And I think there is a sense that, the world has had enough of conflicts. You need, someone at the helm who can actually try and resolve these conflicts and get them to reach some conclusion. Because, not only the effect they have on the people who are actually involved in the conflict and who are suffering from the conflict, but also a collateral damage, to the rest of the world in terms of the economic impact, inflation, and the prices of essentials for people all over the world. So I think indebtedness of nations is also something that we have to take into account. All of this really means that the global South, the developing world, is looking to the United States to take a view that can help bring these conflicts to an end. So whoever becomes president, President Trump has a stated goal of bringing these conflicts to an end.
Yes.
President Kamala Harris has also talked about trying to put an end to the Gaza conflict and to the Middle East issue. Ukraine is more complicated, but whatever it is, I think if you see Prime Minister Modi's endeavor to reach out both to Russia and the Ukraine, it is an expression of our sentiment and that of the global South to try and bring some resolution to these conflicts in the interest of humanity and the world.
Oh, absolutely, Ambassador. In fact, the former President Donald Trump has exuded confidence of bringing a resolution to the ongoing conflicts. In fact, he's been claiming that, the unpredictability factor is actually his strength, how he's been boasting about how these conflicts never, ever had started during his tenure as a president. We're going to watch the space very closely. We have to really slip into a short break, but the news and updates continue, and we'll get you the very latest from our sister channel, CNN, on our continuing coverage of the U.S. presidential elections. 9 years. What makes him tick with the American population?
See, he's a tough president we had for 4 years. Now, he knows all the ins and outs of U.S. politics. He has grabbed it much faster than anybody can. And, he is doing this all his life, being top of the world in a sense, in the real estate or in the banking or anything he has done, he has shown his power that he can do it. See, anybody after losing and after having such a unusual debacle he had after he was out of the presidency, but he did not take it for no. He continued to sustain his power, continue his wit and wisdom to be back in the country.
Despite having an unprecedented criminal conviction against him and a series of indictments, I mean, there's something about Trump that the American population clearly likes.
Yeah, see, the most important part, when he was president for 4 years, I'm just giving an example. The gas price were like $1.50, $1.60. Now it went to $5 to $6 per gallon in the US, especially in California and those areas. It was very high. People could not afford, basic amenities, so they wanted Trump back. I said, this guy will save us and he will make us survive in life because they cannot. The grocery prices went 30 to 40% high, and the average middle-class man or woman could not afford high cost of groceries, high cost of gas, high cost of electricity, and to sustain, to heat, and in the winter time, it was impossible. People, were bankrupt. So what else they can say? Suppose I'm in trouble, I will remember the God who is going to help me, not the guy who is on the street. Biden, we see, I have nothing against Kamala Harris. I'm Indian, of course, I declare. But see, have you heard, ever has she declared she is Indian American or Indian heritage? At least in my memory, she never has accepted she is Indian. Why do you all want to call her Indian? I talked to her 6 years ago when she was a US Senator. And actually what happened, I told her that she has Indian heritage. I got hundreds of calls from African Americans threatening me. How dare you say she is Indian? She is African American, she is American, and she is Black American.
So the Georgia math, we still have the biggest population center where we're waiting to see some key results.
All right, John, as we stand by for the next poll closings at the top of the hour, here's an update on the race to 270. Donald Trump has 154 electoral votes. Kamala Harris has 81 electoral votes. Obviously, 270 electoral votes are needed to win. Now, another key race alert. Let's go to the states where we have not called. Kamala Harris in the lead in Pennsylvania, 51.4% of the vote. Donald Trump has 47.7% of the vote. Kamala Harris has 88,000 plus votes of a lead, but it's about 35% of the vote that's been counted in Pennsylvania, about a third. Still a lot of vote to count in Pennsylvania. Michigan, Kamala Harris has 52% of the vote. Donald Trump has 46.1% of the vote. Kamala Harris with a 49,000 plus vote lead. That's with only an estimated 15% of the vote counted in the battleground of Michigan. In Wisconsin, another battleground, Kamala Harris 52.2% of the vote. Donald Trump 46.1% of the vote. Harris with a 52,000 plus vote lead, but only 27% of the vote counted in Wisconsin, still very early in Wisconsin. Battleground North Carolina, Donald Trump still in the lead there with 52.1% of the vote. Kamala Harris has 46.7% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 201,000 plus vote lead as of now. That's with 64% of the estimated vote counted in the battleground of North Carolina. In battleground Georgia, Donald Trump in the lead, 51.9% of the vote. Kamala Harris, 47.1% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 208,000 plus vote lead. That's with 79% of the estimated vote in Georgia counted. Still a lot of votes to count there, but a lot of votes have already counted. In the Commonwealth of Virginia, Donald Trump. In the Commonwealth of Virginia, Donald Trump has 49.5% of the vote. Kamala Harris, 48.6% of the vote. That is...
All right, going back now to CNN News 18, Zakir Jacob. Zakir, this is the latest that we're getting in that Trump is leading in Wisconsin, but there are still very, very early leads coming in. Pennsylvania has pretty much taken a very strong, decisive stand with Harris. What does this really mean if North Carolina and Georgia is where Trump is leading? He's holding on to his lead in both these battleground states. What does this mean for Kamala Harris, given the fact that Joe Biden had won 6 out of the 7 swing states?
Oh, yeah, I just want to underline 2 facts. One is that in Georgia and in North Carolina, a lot of votes have been counted. In Georgia, for example, almost 80% of the votes have been counted. But what is outstanding, the 20% is to come from Atlanta and its suburbs, and those are primarily Democratic votes. So there is still some fight in that race, even though Donald Trump is leading by over 200,000 votes. Joe Biden won that state by just 12,000 votes last time around. So I will still sort of hold my breath on Georgia, but yeah, Georgia, 80% of the vote counted in. It looks likelier that Trump will win Georgia than lose. North Carolina, again, more than 65% of the vote has been counted. Again, Trump has a 200,000 lead. This was a state that he won by 74,000 votes last time around, so he's in a healthy position. Again, the places in North Carolina where you're going to get results from are the urban pockets. There's still about 30%, 35% of the vote that is still to be counted. Can the Democrats overcome that deficit that they have currently, again, of over 200,000 votes? Whereas in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, all 3 states where Harris is leading, it shows wide margins right now, but the count is very, very low. In Pennsylvania, the count is about 30%, I think 32 or 33%. In Michigan, it is 20%. Even in Wisconsin, it is less than 20%. So I think we need to really hold our breath on these 3 states because the count is so low right now. I think it'll take probably a couple of hours for all 3 of these states to reach over 50%, maybe 60, 70%, and then you're in a position to say, okay, it looks like it's going one way or the other. But I think the critical thing here, Avantika, is if Trump manages to keep both Georgia and North Carolina, then it means that Kamala Harris's path to 270 is straight and narrow. She has to win all 3 blue wall states. She has to win Pennsylvania, she has to win Michigan, and she has to win Wisconsin. If she loses even one of those 3, that's it. That's the end of her campaign. She loses the bid for the White House. Whereas Trump can still manage to win if he wins Arizona, for example, which he's been leading by over 2 points for the last 2 or 3 weeks now. If he wins Arizona, then it has multiple paths for him. He then just needs to win Michigan and Wisconsin. He doesn't need to win Pennsylvania, which is the biggest state of the battleground states. So I think what will become clear, let's say in the next hour, once you get solidified sort of more than 90% counting in both Georgia and in North Carolina, is it will tell you that Harris's path is a one straight line. It's a hit or miss. If she hits, winning all 3 states, she's the next president. If she misses even one state, even the smallest state, which is Wisconsin, just 10 electoral college votes, that's the end of her night. That's the end of her campaign.
Fascinating. And you know, Zakir, what a riveting election this has been. I wanted to understand from you the importance of the demographic groups and also about the Indian American community. Which way will they be voting? Because, you know, Kamala Harris has identified a lot more during the election campaign with her Black heritage than her Indian roots. Do the Indian American community feel a bit disillusioned or disappointed with that? What is the sense that you're getting in? And also a little bit more on the African American vote and the Hispanic vote.
Yeah, I think the Indian American community, we did speak to individuals of the Indian American community. They did, some of them did express not frustration, but really a concern that, you know, she's not been actively playing up her Indian American roots. Her mother is of Indian origin. But, you know, I think there's a straight up political reason for it. The Indian American vote is probably just 1% of the entire electorate. The African American vote is almost 15%. And in some places like in Georgia, for example, it can go up to 30%. So if you're a politician and you're trying to get maximum number of votes, you want to play up that part of your heritage which has more voters, which has more a political value for you. And I don't think, having said that, I don't think she's sort of actively overplayed one part of her heritage and underplayed the other. It just so happened. And I think also politically, Trump sort of tried to put her on the mat when he made that comment a couple of months ago saying, you know, when did she become black? I always thought that she was of Indian origin. I think to try and compensate or to counter that, I think Kamala Harris has actively sort of gone to African-American meetings. She's going to be here at Howard University, her alma mater, which is predominantly a black university. In fact, she's mentioned this time and time again how she came to Howard to sort of revive her African-American heritage, to revive her connection to the African-American community. Remember, her mother and her father had been estranged for a long time. She doesn't talk much about her father, even though her African-American heritage is from her father. But the fact that she came to Howard College and she's revived that part of her heritage, and obviously that's come in handy as a politician because, you know, in many states, in North Carolina and Georgia, in many states, there is a significant African-American vote. And a lot of them are turning up today for Kamala Harris in the hope that they can put the first African-American woman in the White House. So we'll see if that happens. But I think on the Electoral College map, I think the path is becoming very clear. It's becoming very narrow. And it's a straight line hit or miss for Kamala Harris. She has to win all three of Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin if Trump, as he is looking likely now, to win Georgia and North Carolina.
What a high-stakes battle it has been for both the leaders. Zaka, I wanted to understand from you that what has worked for Donald Trump? What an extraordinary reversal of fortunes it has been for this man who has seen a series of indictments, scams, scandals, his popularity plummeting post the 2020 election when he tried to overturn it. He said that that entire election was stolen from him, and how, you know, he has rebounded since. So what really has worked for Mr. Trump?
Well, you must confess that, look, the state of the economy is not very good. A lot of people, particularly after COVID, young people are finding it hard to get decent paying jobs. The cost of housing has gone up in a big way. Young people don't think that they can afford housing in most sort of major cities across the US. So these are concerns that they're worried about. Also, young people, and we've been talking about this all summer, are extremely aggrieved about the wars that are going on, the Russia-Ukraine war, the Israel-Hamas war, which I think, frankly, it is at the doorstep of the Biden-Harris administration. And as much as Kamala Harris has tried to distance herself from the Biden legacy, as it were, I don't think she's been able to do that very successfully. In fact, on the contrary, it is Trump who's managed to sort of pile her on to Biden and say that, look, she is as much responsible for the disaster that's going on in Gaza, the humanitarian catastrophe there. She's as much responsible as Biden for what's going on in Ukraine. And he has made this very simple pitch that, look, if you want to end these two wars, then I am the man that you need to elect. That you elect Kamala Harris, it's just going to be 4 more years of what you got with Biden. There's going to be no clear plan to end these wars. And I think some young voters, particularly young men, seem to have bought in to that pitch by Donald Trump.
Interesting. In fact, many Americans also remember Trump's economy in far better terms than they view the current economy, and that's a very big one in Trump's favor. Zaka, stay on with me. We have to cut straight across now to our sister channel CNN for those projections that are coming in. Let's take a look.
And CNN can project that Donald Trump will win the state of Montana. As expected, Trump gets Montana with its 4 electoral votes. CNN can also project that Donald Trump will win the state of Utah. As expected, Utah with its 6 electoral votes. Nevada is too early to call, a battleground state that Donald Trump has narrowly lost in the last 2 elections, but is making a big play for this election. Let's look at the electoral math right now. Donald Trump has 172 electoral votes. Kamala Harris with 81 electoral votes, 270 electoral votes needed to win. Neither of them is there yet. Let's look at the key races now. Pennsylvania, Kamala Harris, 49.9% of the vote. Donald Trump has narrowed her 20,000 plus vote lead. He's at 49.2% of the vote. More votes have come in from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. 43% of the estimated vote from Pennsylvania is in, and Kamala Harris right now has an 18,000 plus vote lead there. Kamala Harris in the lead in Michigan, 51.6% of the vote. Donald Trump has 46.5% of the vote. Kamala Harris with a 46,000 plus vote lead. Still, only 16% of the estimated vote in Michigan has been counted. In battleground Wisconsin, Harris is at 49.8% of the vote. Donald Trump is at 48.4% of the vote. She has a 15,000 plus vote lead. That's with more than a third, 35% of the vote counted in Wisconsin. In battleground North Carolina, Donald Trump maintaining his lead. He has 52% of the vote. Kamala Harris has 46.8% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 196,000 plus vote lead. That is with two-thirds, 67 counted. In battleground Georgia, Donald Trump maintaining his lead, 51.9% of the vote. Kamala Harris, 47.1% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 208,000 plus vote lead. That's with 79% of the estimated vote in from the battleground state of Georgia. We're now getting an update on the vote in North Carolina. Let's go to John King actually right now. John King, what can you tell us?
Well, Jake, you see the map, and again, as we get later in the night, this is where you start to see things change, especially if a candidate pulls out ahead in a state that not normally is in their lane, if you will. And by that, I'm going to refer to Iowa. Just a moment ago, I was showing you Iowa with the vice president ahead.
Okay, and we have on our broadcast Dr. Joseph M. Chalil, a noted author, Seher Khan, who's also been with us speaking about the issues, the global issues and the impact and the repercussions that this presidency will have on the entire globe. She's a foreign policy expert. And we also are joining now by Gopalan Balachandran. He's a political scientist, academician, and most importantly, he's Kamala Harris's uncle. Mr. Gopalan, thank you so much. You had the chance to meet the vice president just days before President Biden had stepped aside. What do you think are your niece's chances of winning the U.S. presidential race, which has been a tightly contested, affair between the vice president and the former president?
Look, let me first tell you one thing. The least important thing about me is that I'm Kamala Harris' uncle. I know I've been studying.
Why would you say that?
Yeah, I've been studying years for far more years than she's old.
Sure.
So her being my niece has nothing to do with my understanding of the US. Only thing is this, I have quite a lot of agreement with her because I had a lot of agreement with her mother.
Yes.
And that's the first thing. The second thing is I've been hearing for the last 4 years when she was running for vice presidency, people used to ask me, oh, why is she Afro-American and not Indian? I used to tell them, you are all idiots. Her mother went to California when she was 19 years old when there were few Indians, and the Indians never used to mix with the blacks, even when I was there. Two, she was involved in civil rights movement even before many blacks were involved. And that certainly did not endear her to the Indians living in the Bay Area.
Right.
She had very few Indian friends. Three, Kamala they lived in Oakland, which is a black community. Her godmother was Afro-American woman. The school she went were all Afro-Americans. Her friends were Afro-American. So I used to tell the guys who used to ask me in Delhi, why is she Afro-American? I said, you are all idiots. I used to tell them plain, you are not journalists, I am a journalist. These are not the questions you ask. When her whole life was in a black community with a black godmother, etc., and the Indians didn't really mingle with her very much because of her association with the Afro-Americans, you expect she's going to say, oh, I'm an Indian. And two, her mother was a Hindu woman, Brahmin, everybody say. She married a Jamaican, a black African. Indians even today do not like blacks. And you have got laws in various states which prohibit or put obstacles in the way of interreligious marriage. So I used to tell them, you think Kamala is going to tell you, oh, you people are so good. But my mother married a Christian and you are all happy. Bloody hell, you are throwing stones at her. So I said, don't talk rubbish like that. And today I see a couple of other morning also. and saying that she's doing black Americans because of
Right.
minority.
Mr. Gopalan Balachandran, I wanted to ask
No,
you.
she was a black long before she was Hindu.
I get your point.
Let's not bring that question, okay?
All
Now,
right.
your question about our elections.
Yes.
Now, the question is this. Till for the last few months, if you have been following the elections, you would know the consensus among the political scientists in US and the various correspondents and everybody was that Kamala Harris had 226 electoral votes, consensus, and Trump had 219. All the states that you see in the red in the maps today were already given to Trump prior to the election. The only reason is those elections are sometimes they count quicker. And three, you should know that in US, how the votes are counted are not like in India. Each county counts its vote.
Yes.
And there are thousands of counties.
Indeed,
Okay?
yes, Mr. Balachandran, it's a very complex election and also a US election voting system. I'll just come to you, sir. I'll just come to you. Thank you so much for speaking to us, but I will keep coming back to you. You have been very patiently telling us about your niece and how you feel that she is definitely going to be the president of the United States. Akanksha Swaroop, my colleague, is also joining us from New York. She's been getting us not just the sights, but the sounds also of the New Yorkers. Akanksha, over to you. We are just getting in those early trends, early leads on predictable lines. Donald Trump surging past those 100 points in electoral votes. I think the number is 177. He's holding his lead in North Carolina and Georgia, the important battleground states. But tell us, what information do you have? And also, what really are the sentiments? New York, in fact, has been called in the Democrats' favor, also on expected lines as well.
Yes, absolutely. But what is not on expected lines, Avantika, so far is that this is not one election that is shaping up to be as neck and neck that the polls were showing it to be, because the lead right now that we are referring to of Donald Trump is a sizable one. And he just needs another precisely 100 electoral votes to, in fact, to have Kamala Harris concede defeat. And we'll have to see how this, in fact, shapes up in the hours ahead. Many have been calling it a red mirage, which is the term they use when the Republicans have an apparent lead, which is not really a decided one. But so far, many election pundits are saying that this is a red mirage. But I think the electoral votes with which Donald Trump is currently holding that lead in itself speaks for what one can expect from the overall result. As you said, what is on expected lines is, of course, the crucial battleground states like Georgia and North Carolina going in favor of Donald Trump, something that the polls had predicted. Surprisingly, Georgia last time had been won by Joe Biden with a very thin margin of almost 12,000 votes. So this time around, Donald Trump has managed to flip Georgia in his favor. We'll have to see which way, in fact, Pennsylvania goes. Wisconsin, Michigan, along with New York, of course, are expected to. New York, of course, has gone Democratic, but we'll have to see how Wisconsin and Michigan are also shaping up. But having said that, yes, it would be very interesting to see with the kind of victory margin, whoever emerges out to be the winner commands. Is this going to be a sweeping victory? And that's going to, in fact, define the kind of coalition government you will see in the White House.
Oh, absolutely. Akanksha, I'm going to keep coming back to you. So the early trends coming in with Donald Trump surging past the 100 points in electoral votes. Seher Khan is with us, foreign policy expert. Seher, I wanted to understand from you about the significance of this U.S. elections. It's been a neck-and-neck battle between the former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. I know it perhaps is too premature to ask you what do you foresee happening, because one cannot really call the elections till it's over. But the impact of these elections and what kind of impact would it have on global geopolitics in the next 4 years?
Well, that's a great question. And, I definitely don't want to predict. I think we're all in the same room sort of watching the results. But I think the impact on geopolitics and global affairs be will be significant if Donald Trump becomes president. I think oftentimes, and I heard this on the show also, and I've heard other analysts and people speak of Trump how there were no foreign wars when he was president, and how he has declared that he will end the current wars that are going on in Ukraine and in Gaza. And it's hard to know if that will be true or not, but I think the thing that at least troubles me, and this is just my personal opinion, is that, when you're conducting foreign policy, it's important to
Right.
value alliances and international organizations and multilateral organizations and laws and norms for,
Right.
how they stand. And I feel with President Trump, the first time when he became president, he said certain things that he would do, um, that kind of undermined like US relationships with Europe, which are key allies. It also made many allies in the Indo-Pacific very nervous,
Absolutely.
including India as well.
Indeed. Sarah, I'll just come to you. I have to go straight back to Zaka, who's joining us now. Zaka, we are getting in those early trends. Battlegrounds are still too early to call. What's the latest that you're getting in at your end?
Okay, so the latest is that in the two big southern states of Georgia and North Carolina, Trump is ahead, no doubt about it. In both of those states, he's up ahead by 200,000 votes. Georgia, he lost by 12,000 votes last time around. And North Carolina, all right, we're just getting a big roar up here at the Howard University grounds. That's because CNN has just projected that Kamala Harris will get the state of Colorado. That's an important one. So 178 to Donald Trump and 91 to Kamala Harris. So we can now divide it between the two belts, as it were. All right, again, the cheer going up because Kamala Harris, with a tiny sliver of a lead in Arizona, a state that she's consistently sort of not led Donald Trump. So in Georgia and North Carolina, in Georgia more than 80% of the vote is in North Carolina, again, close to 70% of the vote is in. Trump is leading by over 200,000 in both of those states. And I think the critical thing is there enough votes out there in urban pockets, both in Georgia and in North Carolina, for Kamala Harris to overcome the 200,000 lead that Donald Trump has. Technically, there are in North Carolina, for example, there's more than 300,000 votes out there in just one county alone. Same is the case in Georgia as well. So technically, she can, but that does not mean that she is in a good position to overcome that lead that Donald Trump has right now of 200,000. Like I said, Donald Trump won by a mere 74,000 in North Carolina in 2020. He lost by a mere 12,000 votes in Georgia. It is still a long ways to go. I think a couple of more hours, maybe by midnight, we'll get a better picture of both Georgia and North Carolina. But the other three big states, which is really the ones that she needs to win the presidency, which is Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. In Pennsylvania, just 30% of the vote is counted. She's leading. In Michigan, 20% of the vote is counted. She's leading. In Wisconsin, less than 20% of the vote is counted, and she's leading. So there is a long, long way to go before we get some degree of clarity on those states, possibly into the early morning hours of tomorrow. Okay. The reason the cheer is going up is because of Virginia, which is where it's the tri-state area. It's Virginia, Maryland, and of course the District of Columbia, Washington D.C., where we are reporting to you from. And I think CNN was just showing for the first time Kamala Harris taking a lead in the state of Virginia.
Oh, that's an important one. Early trends rolling in with Donald Trump leading, but now also some trends coming in with Kamala Harris winning in a few important states as well. Zaka, we'll keep coming back to you. For now, we have to slip into a short break. Stay tuned. Our continuing coverage on the U.S. presidential polls happens on the other side as well. Keep watching. Stay tuned.
Stay in line. Don't let them take you off that line. Vote. Stay on the line. They can't do anything about it. And vote. We're going to win it big. Thank you. Hi, Republicans. We're doing really well. If you're in line, stay in line. Don't let...
All right, Dr. Sampath, I wanted to get you in here now, and nice to speak to you as well. Now, I want to talk about Donald Trump and just how he has come back from political abyss. As Professor Kuznick was saying, it's a remarkable and extraordinary reversal of fortunes, because when he lost in 2020, it seemed the death knell of his political career. But he's back and he's been relevant for good 9 years. What makes him tick with the American population?
See, he's a tough president we had for 4 years. Now, he knows all the ins and outs of U.S. politics. He has grabbed it much faster than anybody can. And, he is doing this all his life, being top of the world in a sense, in the real estate or in the banking or anything he has done. He has shown his power, that he can do it. See, anybody after losing and after having such a unusual debacle he had after, he was out of the presidency, but he did not take it for no. He continued to sustain his power, continue his wit and wisdom to be back in the country.
Despite having an unprecedented criminal conviction against him and a series of indictments, I mean, there's something about Trump that the American population clearly likes.
Yeah, see, the most important part, when he was president for 4 years, I'm just giving an example. The gas price were like $1.50, $1.60. Now it went to $5 to $6 per gallon in the U.S., especially in California and those areas. It was very high. People could not afford, basic amenities, so they wanted Trump back. I said, this guy will save us and he will make us survive in life, because they cannot. The grocery prices went 30 to 40% high, and the average middle-class man or woman could not afford high cost of groceries, high cost of gas, high cost of electricity, and to sustain, to heat, and in the winter time, it was impossible. People, were bankrupt. So what else they can say? Suppose I'm in trouble, I will remember the God who is going to help me, not the guy who is on the street.
CNN can also project that Donald Trump will be the winner of Mississippi. As expected, Mississippi and its 6 electoral votes go to the Republican. Let's bring in the electoral map right now. Donald Trump in the lead, 178 electoral votes. Kamala Harris has 91 electoral votes, 270 electoral votes, as always, needed to win. Let's take a look at the outstanding races right now. Arizona joins the map of key race alerts. Kamala Harris has 50% of the vote. Donald Trump has 49.2% of the vote. That is a 15,478 vote lead for Kamala Harris, with 49% of the estimated vote counted. Kamala Harris in Wisconsin, 49.9% of the vote. Donald Trump bringing up the rear, 48.5% of the vote. Kamala Harris with a 19,910 vote lead. That's with 43% of the estimated vote counted in Wisconsin. Pennsylvania, Donald Trump in the lead there now, 50.3% of the vote in Pennsylvania. Kamala Harris has 48.7% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 58,648 lead right now, with an estimated 51% of the vote in Pennsylvania. In Georgia, Donald Trump in the lead there, 51.8% of the vote. Kamala Harris, 47.2% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 204,640 vote lead. That's with 81% of the estimated vote in Georgia. In battleground Michigan, Kamala Harris in the lead, 51.1% of the vote. Donald Trump with 47% of the vote. Kamala Harris with a 43,307 vote lead. That's with an estimated 19% of the vote in battleground Michigan. In battleground North Carolina, Donald Trump in the lead, 52.4% of the vote. Kamala Harris with 46.4% of the vote. Donald Trump with 253,752 more votes as of right now than Kamala Harris. That's with 72% of the estimated vote in. In New Mexico, Kamala Harris in the lead, 50.7% of the vote. Donald Trump with 47.6% of the vote. That means Harris has an 8,592 vote lead over Trump. That's with less than a third, 31% of the estimated vote in from New Mexico, still early in New Mexico. Kamala Harris takes the lead again in Virginia with 49.1% of the vote. Donald Trump with 49% of the vote. Kamala Harris with a 1,118 vote lead. That's with 68% of the estimated votes in from Virginia. John, what do you want to talk about?
We have a changing map. We can talk about it all. We'll walk through it. Let's just take
over and be taken over by Russia. And in the Middle East, you know, obviously what Israel is doing has raised a lot of concerns about people. It looks like possible genocide, but they were defending themselves. They were attacked. Again, not Joe Biden's fault. So, you know, all these different cross currents you're seeing here are kind of mind-boggling to watch.
Back to our guest, Ray Locker. Ray, thank you so much for patiently waiting. You know, we're getting in all these updates as Americans are out there voting for the next president of the United States of America. I wanted to understand a little bit from you about the demographic groups and the various shifts that American politics has seen in the last few years, especially post-COVID.
I mean, well, post-COVID and post the Dobbs Supreme Court decision in 2022 that knocked out the Roe v. Wade ruling, I mean, that's changed a lot of women's voting behavior. Democrats did well in 2022 in places because women came out in reaction to that court decision. In rural America, you see more and more white voters voting heavily Republican, margins like 80% to 20% in favor of the Republican candidate. You're seeing more of that. That's while those areas are losing population, the margins still increase. So that kind of makes up for some of the population loss. And then when you see, you know, in this election, the approval ratings for President Biden are really pretty bad. And so that's a strong headwind for Vice President Harris, since she's been basically serving with him. You know, I'm of the impression that, you know, Biden has done a really good job as president. I know that's something that's not widely shared, but, you know, our economy is strong. And you mentioned earlier the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East. I mean, those aren't his fault. Trump makes it seem like that wouldn't have happened if he had been president. We don't know that. And Biden managed to put together a very strong coalition to defend Ukraine. And what, you know, I ask people who say they want that war to stop, what would you have Ukraine do? Just roll over and be taken over by Russia? And in the Middle East, you know, obviously what Israel is doing has raised a lot of concerns about people. It looks like possible genocide, but they were defending themselves. They were attacked. Again, not Joe Biden's fault. So, you know, all these different cross currents you're seeing here are kind of mind-boggling to watch.
Absolutely, Ray. Thank you so much for joining us and, you know, also taking us through your perspective on the U.S. presidential elections. And we'll cut straight across now to CNN. There are some very important leads coming in right now. Let's take a look.
John King, voting is about to end in 15 states, the second biggest wave of results this evening. 163 electoral votes will be up for grabs, and we're watching several crucial battlegrounds. CNN's going to bring you this projection right now. CNN projects that Texas will go to Donald Trump. The state of Texas, as expected, to Donald Trump.
Good morning and a
with
warm
its
welcome.
big
It
bucket
is
of
the
40
race to the
electoral
White
votes.
House,
CNN
and we bring
projects
you this
that North
continuous
Dakota will
coverage
go to
on
Donald
CNN
Trump.
News 18.
As
I'm
expected,
Rehatul.
North Dakota
Let's
with its
begin with
3
the latest
electoral votes. 2
developments
more
that
for Trump now.
we are getting
CNN
from
projects
America, as we're learning
that
that the former US
South Dakota
President Donald
will go to
Trump
Donald Trump. South
will
Dakota
be
is
winning
expected with its 3
Ohio. That is
electoral
what
votes
the
to Donald
CNN
Trump.
is
And
projecting
CNN
at the
projects
moment.
that
These are the
Wyoming
projections
will
that
go
we are
to
learning
Donald
of.
Trump.
There are 17
Wyoming.
electoral votes that are at stake in Ohio. Remember, it takes at least 270 electoral votes to win the 2024 presidential bid. And right now, Donald Trump has the lead. CNN's Paula is with us on the broadcast. Paula, we were talking about these swing states, and now we're learning about Ohio, which is completely going the Republican way. What are things looking like for Kamala Harris at the moment? If Trump wins this one, the rest of the 3 states that are left as far as the swing states are concerned, it's an absolute must-win for Kamala. Otherwise, she's out of the race.
The must-win remains the same for Kamala Harris. It is Wisconsin, it is Michigan, it is Pennsylvania. And there can be absolutely no upsets. Why? Because while they're still too close to call, North Carolina and Georgia are beginning to look good for Donald Trump. The issue here, though, and you bring up an important one, while the fact that Ohio was always supposed to go to Donald Trump, when you look at the margin in Ohio, it is quite high for Donald Trump. And when you consider it looks like he is going to carry a state like that quite strongly, then you're starting to look at how that might extrapolate to a state like Wisconsin. And perhaps even a place like Michigan. Right now, though, I caution that so many of these races are still too close to call, especially when you see how divided the states themselves are between rural counts or counts in cities or counts in the suburbs around those cities.
Right, Paula, but so far, from whatever we are learning of the US polls and the results of the early trends that are trickling in, it has been pretty much evident. And these are the places that were going to go the Republican way. If we take a look at what has gone to the Democrats' favor, it has been places like New York or New Jersey for that matter. So it has been pretty much in line with the trend.
Well, what has been true throughout this was that the polls indicated this would be close and that it has been quite close. And that even comes down to the popular vote. I mean, think about it. Donald Trump did not win the popular vote. That just did not happen even in 2016 when he actually won the presidency. Right now, there is a chance he will win the popular vote in this country. Not just win the election, but win the popular vote, which will mean that a majority of voters voted for him. It's not just the Electoral College.
Absolutely.
This is not definitive yet. I do want to stress that it is very early, and there are a lot of votes still to come in. This is what the Trump campaign, though, is counting on right now. You can hear the enthusiasm behind me. As far as this crowd is concerned, they are incredibly confident right now and do believe that Donald Trump will be back in the White House as president.
Absolutely,
What is
Paula,
going to be crucial now is to look at
Absolutely. Please go ahead. I just wanted to understand about that entire mood because you are there at the Trump headquarters in Florida and we can see the kind of cheer that he is receiving because the early trends clearly are going in his favor. So that's an absolute must do when it is, voting as far as in favor of the Republicans is concerned. So first of all, about the mood around you, and then we'll go further and talk about how this red mirage really is progressing from here on.
I mean, look, it is incredibly optimistic here. This is not 2020 as they continue to see the votes come in. But they also are looking at the margins. They are looking at the margins in a place like Ohio. They are looking at margins in places like North Carolina where they expect it to be closer. And that's why they do not believe in the mirage, so to speak. They believe that the results for 2024 will chart their own course for the Trump campaign. And I go back to what I said about the popular vote. For Donald Trump to win a majority of Americans right across the country would be significant for his campaign, and his campaign will see it as true legitimacy in governing. I do want to stress as well, though, just as important, right? Congress.
Right.
Do the Republicans hold on to the House? Do the Democrats hold on to the Senate? They could switch, or it could go either way. That is truly significant as well in terms of whoever gets into the White House and how they'll be able to govern.
Right, Paula, thank you so much for all of those updates there. We'll continue to come back to you. But right now we are, in fact, going to our guests who are joining us early this morning. Harshvi Shringla, who's the former Indian ambassador to the United States of America, is with us. Also with us is Raymond Vickery, author and advisor on US-India relations and a former US Assistant Secretary of Commerce, Trade Development. He's live with us from Washington, D.C. So I begin with you. All right, I'm told Vickery is yet to join us. In fact, we will go to Ambassador Shringla at the moment. Ambassador Shringla, I was just wanting to understand from you, since we are learning of these early trends that are coming in, it is pretty much swinging in favor of Donald Trump as far as Ohio and the other key Republican states who have voted in favor of Republicans are concerned. But we have to go back to what happened back then in 2020. I was talking to my colleague from CNN as far as the Red Mirage is concerned. How do you think the Republicans and in turn Donald Trump is looking at keenly watching whether or not this Red Mirage really goes ahead and swings in favor of the Republicans, or is it going to be a rerun of 2020 because Biden clearly swayed it away from the Republicans? The votes completely turned in the favor of the Democrats back then. How nervous or how confident do you think Donald Trump is at the moment?
Well, I think you're right in saying that it's very early to really come to any conclusions about the way the race is going. I imagine both candidates will be watching, the numbers coming in very carefully. The point I want to make is that, voting is going as predicted.
Yes.
States are voting on predictable lines. The red states are going red, the blue states are going blue. My own prognosis is that everything depends on Pennsylvania. That one state will determine who will win the presidency, who will win the electoral college vote. And I think we will have to come down to exactly what happens there. Because there is a trend that, Donald Trump is winning some of the Sun Belt states, whereas, Kamala Harris may win some of the Rust Belt states, which is basically Wisconsin, perhaps even Michigan. But Pennsylvania, I think, is going to be the key to this entire race, and we will have to watch that part very carefully. It's a very close contest with Donald Trump leading with a very, very small margin. He was trailing earlier, but it's early days. I think 50% of the vote is yet to be counted.
Yes.
And I would focus on that one state, Pennsylvania, that would be very critical to the way this election is decided.
Right, Ambassador Shringla, thank you so much. In fact, hold your thought there. We also have Stephen Golub, who's an international affairs expert, who's also live with us from California. Stephen, about these early trends, and since Ambassador Shringla was also mentioning about Pennsylvania, a key swing state, so far more than 35 or 40% of the votes have been counted, and they are sort of neck and neck and yet in favor of Kamala Harris. If she loses this